Hello there, I'm Black Bright News, and I'm not quite sure how many of you have seen the Telegraph headlines about these 15 police officers who are being evicted because of the Renters' Right Act, or so the headlines say. But you know, headlines are always exaggerating, and I'm here to debug or defuse the headlines. So let's get around to it. I've only got 10 minutes, and so yeah, I've called it Police Housing, Renters' Rights, and what this story is really telling us. Around 15 police families in Surrey have been issued with a Section 21 eviction notice. These are no fault notices under the current law. They've been told they need to leave before early May 2026. The timing matters because the Renters' Right Act comes into force on May 1st. Once that law takes effect, Section 21 evictions will no longer be available in most circumstances. The homes involved are not privately owned buy-to-lets. They're property owned by the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Surrey is unusual because it held on to police housing while most other forces sold theirs years ago. The reason was simple. Surrey is extremely expensive, and without some form of subsidised housing, many officers could not afford to live anywhere near where they worked. The properties have been rented to officers and staff at around 40% below market rent. And for years this worked as practical, informal solution to a real problem. Officers could live locally, the force could recruit and retain staff, and the housing quietly did its job in the background. What has changed is not the existence of the housing, but the rules governing who gets to live in it and for how long. Ahead of the new legislation, the Police and Crime Commissioner has changed the eligibility criteria. Going forward, these homes are to be reserved for officers with 3 years service or less and earning under £40,000. In other words, the housing is being repositioned as short-term support for new recruits, not long-term accommodation for established officers. To make this shift possible before the law changes, the PCC has used the legal tool that still exists right now, Section 21. PCC is once again the Police and Crime Commissioner. This is not a case of central government targeting police families, and Angela Rayner has not ordered these evictions. The Renters' Rights Act does not instruct landlords to remove tenants. What it does is removes a landlord's ability to evict without a defined reason once it becomes law. So what we're seeing here is a landlord, in this case a public authority, the PCC, making a decision before the rules change, because once they do, the decision becomes much harder to make. From the PCC's perspective, the concern is this. If long-term tenants remain in these homes indefinitely, then the force loses a scarce recruitment tool. New officers, especially younger ones or those relocating, struggle to find affordable housing in Surrey. If the housing stock is locked up by long-serving officers, the argument goes, the system stops serving its original purpose. Dodgy. The human impact is real because some of the officers being asked to leave have lived in these homes for years. They've raised families there. They've built their lives around the assumption that this was stable housing linked to their service. No one told them clearly that it was temporary. No one put an end date on it. Now, with relatively short notice, they are being told they must uproot their lives in one of the most expensive housing markets in the country at a time when rents are high and availability is tight. From their point of view, this feels like loyalty being punished. It feels like the rules are being changed after the fact. And it feels particularly harsh because the change is being justified in the name of helping other officers. This is where the Renters' Rights Act becomes a part of the story. The Act is designed to strengthen tenants' security, limits arbitrary eviction. It shifts power away from the landlords towards the renters. But when power shifts, behaviour changes. Landlords, including public bodies, look ahead and ask themselves what they need to lock in now, before their discretion narrows. And that's what's happening here. The law hasn't caused the eviction, it has triggered a decision about priorities. And that brings us to the real tension beneath the story: scarcity. There are not enough affordable homes, there are not enough police officers, there are not enough resources to meet every need at once. When systems are stretched like this, choices become visible, and those choices create winners and losers. In this case, the winners are future recruits who may benefit from subsidised housing early in their careers. The losers are existing officers who assumed that what they had was secure. Neither side is acting irrationally. Neither side is inventing the harm they feel, but the structure forces a trade-off. Surrey is the only force left with this kind of housing. That means this is a rare example of a benefit that survived longer than most. Many officers elsewhere never had this option at all. That doesn't make the evictions easier for those affected, but it does help explain why the system is now being scrutinised sharply. What this story really shows is what happens during transitions. When informal arrangements meet formal rights, organisations often act quickly to define boundaries they left vague before. The people most affected are usually those who thought they were settled. Can you imagine the shock of being told that something you'd built your life around was never as secure as you believed? They probably did renovations and all sorts in there. And this won't be the last time we see this pattern. As renters' protection increases, landlords and public and private will be clearer, stricter and sometimes harsher about who gets access to limited resources. That clarity can protect future tenants while destabilising current ones. So when we read this headline, it helps to slow it down. Police officers are not being punished by housing reform. A public landlord is making a difficult decision early to preserve control over a scarce asset, and real families are paying the cost of that decision. The story isn't simple. It's that uncomfortable... What was this? Sorry. It's that uncomfortable... Can't read it. It's the uncomfortable middle ground where policy, pressure and people collide. That's where most real-world housing stories live. When reform changes, who holds the power? The first impact is rarely theoretical. It shows up in notice letters, moving dates, and families forced to re-evaluate what they thought was stable. Transitions reveal priorities, and priorities always come with a human price. And that's the problem with this Section 21 that I'm sure there's going to be. It's only because it's the police that we're hearing about this, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people being evicted before the 1st of May because of the Section 21, where they won't be able to do it so easily. And you kind of think, well, landlords, they do want to have an element of control over their properties. And after the 1st of May, they won't have that control. So I guess a lot of them will be scrambling around to see whether or not they can get people out. And depending on the length of the lease or what other rules are in place, who knows? Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. I hope you found it interesting, or, it landed correctly. And I guess that's all I'm going to say for now. I've got to get ready for my show. I'm on in a couple of hours. Lovers Rock Radio 7 till 9, just in case. And that's all for now. You take care. Bye-bye.